Hey, what's up everyone? This is Valoramous. In today's DJ tutorial, we're going to talk about the basics of scratching. So we'll talk about hand selection, hand placement on the platter, and then sound selection. So we'll hop into Rekordbox, which is my DJ software of choice, and I'll show you my method for preparing these basic fundamentals for scratching. So the first step is hand selection. So just because you're left or right-handed does not mean your best hand is going to be that same hand. For example, I'm left-handed, and I actually prefer to scratch with my right hand. So in order to do this, what I want you to do is give me your impression of scratching when a DJ actually scratches, and that will tell you what hand you are. So for me, when I think of a DJ that scratches, I think of this. So one hand to the headphones and one hand on the scratch, on the platter, that is what hand you actually prefer to scratch with. So just because you're right-handed, you may actually think this is your impression of scratching, so you're actually be strong with your left hand. Now for myself, I can scratch with my left and my right, but I definitely prefer my right hand. So my left hand is definitely my weak hand, even though I'm left-handed. And a lot of that is due to the fact that you're also going to be using the Crossfader. And because I'm left-handed, actually I prefer to use my strong hand on the Crossfader because I have to be a little bit more versatile, especially when you're doing more advanced scratches. So today we're only going to be covering the baby scratch, which is the most basic of scratching. And you must master the basics before you can step into higher advanced scratching techniques. So now that we have our hand down, the next technique you need to learn is placement on the platter. So the best way to place your hand on the platter is not at a 45-degree angle, it's not at a 180-degree angle. It's going to be between that 30 to not quite 0, but between 5 and about 30 degrees. So you want to be almost parallel with the floor, but not quite. So ideally you want your hand about like this, and then you want to either use, this is personal preference, but you can use 1 finger, 2 finger, 3 fingers, no more than 3 though. If you start getting the whole hand, your pinky might be getting in the way of actually scratching. And then you want to, on the clock position, between about 7 and 11 o'clock is where you want to be scratching. So I like to use 2 fingers as I'm scratching. As you can see there, I'm going to turn the volume down. You can see there I'm between about the 7 and 11 o'clock. So, and my hand is roughly at about 20 to 30 degree angle. So, and all scratching is just the basic back and forward motion on the platter and the sound that emits. So the baby scratch is just merely a back and forth, up, down, or forward, back, forward, back. Okay, and then the third consideration to take into account when you are scratching is sound selection. So with sound selection, there are sample packs which have great scratching sounds. There are vocals which you can scratch over. You can scratch with kicks, with snares, with claps. But in general, I find that you want to have sounds that occupy those middle frequencies. If you go too low in the frequency spectrum, for example, you're just using a kick to scratch, it's going to sound a bit too muddy and it won't sound pleasing to the ear. So a lot of times in these scratching samples, you are going to have scratching sounds that don't have a whole lot of low end, or they're going to be vocals. They'll say like little chants like, yo, yes, yeah, hands up in the air, and that's all occupying the middle frequencies because a lot of vocals occupy the middle frequencies. So in general, you want to scratch, especially if you're scratching the next track in on the 1 beat, you want your scratch sound to be that 1 beat so you can scratch in time much easier and more effectively. But sometimes you are going to choose a scratching sound that is actually on the 2, 3, or 4 beat. For example, there was a track that I was scratching recently where the 1, which was a kick drum, was very low in the mix, you could barely hear it, and the 2 was a snare drum, and that sounded much more pleasing in the air. So I actually scratched using the snare drum, and it was on the 2 beat, and that's a little bit more advanced because the timing is a bit more awkward than scratching on the 1 where everything is in time with the beat. So those are just a few considerations to take an example. So I will show you an example on my Rekordbox DJ. Okay, so now we're going to play a quick beat and I'll show you a quick example of the baby scratch. Okay, again, so I like to use 2 fingers on the platter and then in time with the beat. finally, last but not least, I recommend you disengage the crossfader in your DJ deck. So on your individual volume faders, you'll have settings for A, B, and then throughput. And you want to set all these settings to through. So that means whichever side the crossfader is on, either A or B, the sound will come through. That's what that means. So disengage the crossfader when they're in the baby scratch because you don't want to accidentally hit the crossfader to one side and then kill the sound. Just focus on the baby scratch, focus in time with the beat. So on that 1 beat scratch, 2 beat scratch, 3 beat scratch, 4 beat scratch, and that will improve your skills much more rapidly. So there you have it. That's my quick recommendations for learning how to scratch. Remember, it's hand selection, which may not coincide with your dominant hand. It is hand placement on the platter. Again, you're not going to have your hand too steep at an angle, but closer and more parallel to the floor, but not quite parallel. And then the third is the actual sound selection. So there are sample packs you can get with great scratch sounds, but in most cases, when you're scratching in tracks, you're going to be using the 1 beat, the first beat, or the first transient of the incoming song. But keep in mind that that first transient may not be the actual best sound selection. So in some cases, you are going to choose the 2 or the 4 beat because a lot of times the snare falls on the 2 and the 4. And sometimes the snare drum is actually a better scratch sound because it occupies more of those middle frequencies. Okay, so if you think I'm forgetting something, please leave in the comments below. If you like this content, like to see more, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you.